everyone, Emily here from Emily Reads, and today I have for you my August wrap up. Holy cow. I can't believe August is over. Uh, so, I guess I can. It's back to school, it's back to work, but I just feel like the summer just flew by. A couple of things before I get started on filling my wrap up. One, I have my window open. It is beautiful out. We had some time this week where it was 98 degrees and the heat index was 115. It's 70. I have to enjoy the nice weather while I can because, winter will bring 30 to negative 20. So I want to enjoy the nice weather while I can. In addition, I think they quieted down, but right when I was about to start filming this, my neighbors were playing music pretty loud. So fingers crossed that they have stopped. But for August, I read 8 books. 2 were ebooks. So I'll just talk about those briefly. The first book that I read was Seducing the Enemy by Noelle Adams. I've read this before. It was a reread. It was her first book in the Heirs of Damon series. And the premise of it is our main female character, she and her sister and a man named Damon, last name of Damon, they were all in a car accident, and her sister and the man were killed. She was like 12 or 13 at the time, and she was paralyzed from waist down. And the Damon family has been insisting that their son, their brother, was not at fault in this car accident. She and her family have been insisting he was intoxicated, and that's why the car crashed. So fast forward several years later, like 10 or so years later, she now is fully recovered. She's walking, and she goes with a friend to a bar, and this is on the evening where her family and the Damon family are hoping to settle, come to a legal agreement with regards to the accident. And she goes to this bar, and she's like, I am going to have a random hookup with someone. Well, you can imagine who that someone was. It was one of the Damon brothers, and they discover it the next day, and oh man, what's going to happen? I did enjoy it. It was okay. I have more thoughts now after reading one of the books that I read later in the month, where it's kind of like, I wonder how the romance would have played out if she didn't make a full physical recovery, if she ended up, living the rest of her life in a wheelchair, and needing to use a wheelchair. So I'm just curious, I think that would have been a pretty compelling story as well. Then I also read Restoration. This is the 4th book in her Worthings series, and that one is our main female character. She is an assistant to a Worthing family member who just kind of is a playboy, kind of does what he wants. He doesn't have to work because he's so rich. And she's kind of been his assistant for 6 years, and she's like, you know what? I kind of put my life on hold for this job. I needed it to help support my family, but now's the time, I need to go back to school and get a degree. And so she quits, but before her last day, they are going on a yacht trip. I don't remember why. And their yacht gets caught in a storm, and they get shipwrecked on this island. And wow, shocker, guess what do you think happens? And it was a light fluff read, so that was nice. I needed it at a time when August is just a stressful time. But I didn't really care for, the characters, meh. It was just fine. I would say it was a 3-star. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. Okay, now going to the physical books. I did participate in Catch-Up-a-thon. I read 4 books, and here we go. So the first book I read, I was so anticipating this book, and that is Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. I thought this was a rom-com. Following, I can't remember our main character's name. So Rue, she is like in bio, like fuel engineering with like food, and he and his, I can't remember his name either. Eli Kilgore, he and his company are going to take over this company, and they have reasons why. And so they end up involved in a relationship, but only until the buyout takes place. So you can guess what kind of relationship that is. Now, at the start of this book, Allie Hazelwood said, sorry, I needed to get a little more comfortable there. Allie Hazelwood said, this is not a romantic comedy. I am trying my hand at erotic romance. Now, I read Bride, and I really liked it. I've read all of other Hazelwood's books, loved them. With the exception of the novellas, there were a couple of the novellas that I didn't like. Only one I really liked. This one, 2.5 stars, and that's being generous. Here's why. One, like, look at this cover. You think romantic comedy. Bride, very clearly not a romantic comedy. Very clearly a paranormal romance on the cover. If you're going to delve your hands into erotic romance, which is something new for you, Allie Hazelwood, then your designers should design a cover that's a little bit differently. Because Bride was done differently. This was not. And so, and also like just the blurb that I've read on it, I thought, oh, we're back in our rom-com. No, it was not. This is now going to get a little bit more spoilery with why I didn't care for it. So just keep that in mind. One thing that I had a problem with is it kind of went back and forth between almost dark erotic romance and rom-com. And following her formulas that she had for rom-coms. So it was really confusing where I was like, what are you trying to do here? Like, what, like, there's always like one person is going to be the evil bad guy kind of, and very problematic. And then, our hero is going to be misunderstood. That for sure followed that formula. And she has that formula in her rom-coms. But then she also had moments where it was like, this is really kind of a dark erotic romance moment where like he is basically obsessed with her, and like there's one moment where he talks about how he wants to follow her home and sit outside her home in his car and have a moment with himself, if you catch my drift. And like that's just weird. Like to me, that's just like ew. Like that's just creepy, dark, stalkery. And he makes comments like that, and like that's a dark erotic romance. But then she flips to rom-com-y moments and following her rom-com formula. So it was just a really like I didn't quite know where she was going with this. She just needed to pick. I feel like she needed to pick like if she's going to do the erotic romance, then go all in. Make sure that cover is change is done, and go all in, and make sure that like the blurb reflects that as well. And then, or stick to what you're familiar with and go all in with that. This kind of dipped its toes in both worlds, and it was just, and because of that, the book suffered. It wasn't an enjoyable read because it just had these really like odd, creepy, like, yeah. So this book, I'm sad to say, is going to my Pango shop because as much as I want to collect all her works, because I do love Allie Hazelwood, I know I'm not going to read this again. So it as soon as this is done filming, this will go in my Pango shop. Then I also read What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez. And this is a YA book. We start off in Buenos Aires, and I can never remember characters' names. Inez Oliveira, she gets word that her parents who are in Egypt, they've died. And so she goes over to Egypt because she wants to know where, like, they haven't found her parents' bodies, so she believes that they're still alive. And so she goes over to Egypt, and it's the 1800s. It's at a time when Britain's influence is heavy in Egypt. They are, grave robbing the tombs to bring back to the museums in Britain or just for individual collectors. So that theme is heavy in this book as she investigates what is going on with her parents. I grew up going to the Field Museum and loving learning about ancient Egypt. So I loved the fact that we were in that world, and having the archaeological digs and doing the discoveries. There is some fantasy in this. There is kind of some magic, like objects can hold the magic, but we don't really get a solid explanation of that magic and how it works. And so for that reason, I'm only giving this book a 4-star. I think if that explanation was a little bit stronger or a little bit more developed, this book would have been better. It did have me surprised in some things. I am kind of confused on one of our characters, like what are their motivations? What is their allegiance? I'm curious to figure out where that is going to go. The sequel comes out, I think, in November, and the cover is just as stunning as this one. So I'm hoping that Book of the Month will pick up the sequel, because if so, then for sure it will be an auto buy for me, because I need to know. It's a duology, so I need to know what happens next. Then I also read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. And I was pleasantly surprised with how much I enjoyed this. I will say this, I gave it a 4-star. It would have been higher, except there were 2 sequences that I just didn't like. One I struggled with because we shifted from third-person point of view to second, where it was like, you. Now, and it was a shocker, and it took me out of the story. It was meant to be a shocker because of the reason why we are now in that point of view, but I just didn't care for it. And then there was a sequence where we're kind of in a video game that was 25 pages long. Yes, I know, because I counted, and it just dragged. I was like, I just wanted over. It could have been 10 pages, and even that would have been too much for me. But I was surprised by how much I enjoyed this, because our 2 main characters, they are both video game designers. They meet when our main male character, Sam, he is in the hospital following a car accident and is receiving treatment on his leg and his ankle, and Sadie Green's sister has cancer. And so they meet when they're children in the hospital. They become friends. There's a break in the friendship, and then they meet years later. While she's at Harvard, he's at Yale, I believe, or it could be switched around, or MIT. I can never remember. But they decide to develop video games. And I thought, now I did not grow up with video games. Like, we just could not afford it. And honestly, my family were readers, so we weren't really interested in it anyway. But like, we also couldn't afford it. So like, I could probably count on 2 hands the number of times I've played a video game in my life. Yes, I know. But I did find this fascinating, just to read about the beginning developments of the video game and the technology, and also just some of the things that they were talking about. I'm like, yep, because I was in this, like, they're in college in the late 90s, and that was when I was in college. So that was just kind of fascinating to me. And for the fact that, like, they're not the most likable characters, but they're also real. Like, people are messy, and we aren't perfect and we make mistakes, and that's what these characters were. And so I really did enjoy it. Um, and then lastly, for Catch Up-a-thon, I read The Maid by Anita Prose. And I don't know if I would call this a cozy mystery, but it's a mystery. And the reason why I wouldn't call it a cozy mystery is like, there was a twist that I gasped out loud. So I would give this 4.5 stars because there was something that I just was not expecting. And it made me gasp out loud. And for that to happen is just wonderful because I usually don't have that reaction when I read thrillers or mysteries. I'm just kind of like, yep, I thought it was that person. Okay, but I just didn't realize what the motivations were. I just didn't see something coming, and that made it wonderful. I just wanted to give Molly, our maid, a hug as she tries to investigate this. She's caught up in this murder that happens at the hotel that she works at as a maid, as she really struggles, also grieving her grandmother's death and not really fitting in and not having friends because um, it's not really said, but it does appear that she is autistic. She definitely has a very rigid rule system that she follows, a set routine that she follows, and she doesn't understand social like interactions with people. So, like some of the social nuances she just doesn't get. But yeah, I really did enjoy this. Apparently, there's a quote that I marked. So let's see what quote I marked. Oh, here we go. She said, "That's the trouble with pain. It's as contagious as a disease. It spreads from the person who first endured it to those who love them most. Truth isn't always the highest ideal. Sometimes it must be sacrificed to stop the spread of pain to those you love. Even children know this intuitively." Oof, I wasn't expecting that quote. So, yeah, I already have ordered The Mystery Guest. I'm just waiting for my Book of the Month box to come to me, and I'll be picking that up soon. Okay. Then I was on the struggle bus with reading because I had a nonfiction book that I had to read because I had recommended it for a virtual book club that I'm a part of. And it was also back to school. So, I would just come home utterly exhausted. But I did manage to read Disfigured on Fairy Tales, Disability, and Making Space. So this is a nonfiction by Amanda Leduc. I don't know how I'd rate nonfiction. I will say this. I would probably give 4 star, 3.5, 4 star. Here's why. I think her thesis was fantastic. So her main kind of thesis is, so she really looks at fairy tales, Hans Christian Andersen, Grimm's fairy tales, and then through to, of course, Disney, and talks about, where are people with disabilities in fairy tales? If they are there, they are villains, or they are written as people who need to overcome that disability and get rid of that disability to live their full self-actualized life. And why does it have to be? Why can't society make space for that person with a disability versus that person with a disability has to change in order and conform with society? So I thought she made some really good points. How she structured her narrative it took me a minute to figure out, to get accustomed to it. So she starts off with sometimes so she herself has cerebral palsy, following she was born with a cyst in her brain, and then following the surgery, and just how that cyst impacted areas of her brain. So we get medical records, and then we'll have her analyzing fairy tales, and then we'll have narrative from when she was growing up, from the moment she was born through adulthood. And so at times it was kind of jarring to kind of figure out like how is she structuring this and why is she structuring it this way. But I do think it was a good read and really important. Um, I do think like I think we need to make space, and not only make space, but like people need to have leads. Like, sorry, I'm trying to put my thoughts into words. Like, it was just, I mean, it was a cool moment in Bridgerton, right? When it's like, oh, this person is communicating using sign language, and this person is using a wheelchair. But they were just kind of brief moments, move on. We need to make, and we need to make space where they're fully included. And I think society needs to do a little bit better. So I do recommend reading this. I'm glad I did. So there's that. And then lastly, I read book 7 in Keeper Velocity's Flashback. Um, book 10 comes out later this year. I'm not going to be ready for it. I have 3 more books to read. And look, like this was 815 pages long. I would give this book 4 stars, I think. Maybe 4.5. Um, only because I felt like there were moments that could have been edited down. There were moments that I felt like dragged or could have just been tighter. I do. We are getting more development with the Never Seen. I do feel like some of it is kind of like the same rehashing of things. I was a little shocked by a moment. I think it would have been, I just finished this yesterday, so I'm still kind of processing. There was a character who I wish had a redemption arc. I think that would have been a more compelling moment than them not having that redemption arc. Um, and I feel like Sophie's kind of a little dumb when it comes to the boys in her life. Like, she's a little kind of dumb. But yeah. Also, oh, speaking of boys in life, so I have to add this. This is also going to be a little spoilery. Okay. So I'm going to raise my hand. In case you want to read this, I do really like the series, but I'm going to raise my hand because this is a little spoilery moment. Okay. So here's the problem that I have. So we know, like by now, we have learned that the elves are not this idyllic utopia place, okay? There was a moment, so one of the things that's big in this is, it's, I don't think they call it the registry, but it's kind of like the registry where like you sign up and you go and you say, I want to be put on the matchmaking list and then figure out who I'm matched with. And we learned that the reason why this system works or why this system was developed and put in place for the elves to figure out like who should they be matched with to get married and have children was so that way they can have the stronger, more powerful genes would win out and they can have stronger and more powerful elf children. I don't know about you. That really reminded me of a regime that existed in Germany in the 30s and the 40s. And I don't know if she was going for that effect. Maybe she was. And for sure, that would go over middle schoolers' heads who aren't aware of those policies. It wouldn't go over the adults who are reading this book's heads. But that's what it reminded me of. And that's just really problematic for me. And I don't, at this moment in time, I don't know if we're, like, I don't think she comes out and is like, yeah, that's not really a good thing. So I'm hoping that we get, like, that's not a good thing, because it's not a good thing. So I'm hoping that we get that as a stance. So, all right, spoilery talk done. I'm still looking forward to reading the rest of the series. I thought book 10 comes out later this year. I think it's 9.5 comes out, and then book 10 will come out next year. At any rate, that was the last book that I read this month. And so overall, I read some really good books. Nothing was like, oh, this was great. And I don't know what's going on, like why that is. Am I getting harsher? Am I reading books that are just not great for me? I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of these, what your thoughts are. What was a standout read for you this month? If you've made it to the end, comment with a stack of books, and like, subscribe, hit the notification button, do all those social media things. Have a wonderful Labor Day. Bye.